Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microschool Dream Summit. We are so excited you have found us, no matter how you found us. um, my name is Rochelle. I have Tom and Lorian here with me, and we're really excited about microschools, and we've been doing this for a long time. We've all run our own microschools. I'm currently running my own, and Tom and Lorian started in 2019, although Lorian has been doing something sort of similar without that name in a long time. Iman Aline will join us a little bit later and talk about finance. What we want to give you here today is 90 minutes of both an understanding that you're capable, a way to know what it is you need to know, how to be thinking about this, and the fact that you've probably been thinking about this for a really long time and wondering how you can do the thing you love, but do it in a way that has a more meaningful impact on the kids that you're working with or kids in your community. It might be that you're a long time educator. It might be that you've never actually been in a classroom, but you love kids and you know how to motivate and see and love them. As I've been running my micro school this year, I have come to the I don't know if it's a conclusion. I don't know if I ever have actual conclusions, but what I see is that when kids feel loved, they feel safe. And when they feel safe, they're going to learn. And it almost doesn't matter how good I am at teaching it or how good the curriculum is. They will it's just, I'm blown away by how true, more and more true this is becoming to me. As they just know they're so safe, they want to do the things. And there's a lot of people that really believe that kids can't be trusted with making quality decisions for themselves. People think you put these things out, you give them choice, they're going to choose the easy route, they're going to choose path of least resistance. They're not going to work. I just had a kid who gets a certain amount of free time on his computer from his mom every day, and he was at my house and we were talking about a English language arts tool, and he's like, can I do that for free time? And it's just they're going to do the hard things when they feel safe, because they then are in charge of becoming what they want to be. And in giving them that, everyone wants to be great, but we mask that on a regular basis, because if we think if we think we can't be great, then we're not going to try to be great. And so we short circuit kids all over the place by not allowing them the freedom to step into their own greatness that exists inside of them. This was not anything I had planned for this introduction. And now I have, I'm presenting and now I'm crying and, whatever. But this is when if anything that I'm saying resonates for you, you're in the right place. Because if you're oh no, I am going to tell kids what to do, you might not want to keep watching or listening, because, or maybe, I don't know. Everyone's welcome here for sure. But I feel really, really strongly about this. And I'm watching it with 15 kids between the ages of 5 and 14 that come to my house 4 days a week for 5 hours. I'm seeing it over and over and over again. And it was a theory. Like I said, I don't come to actual conclusions, but the evidence is mounting really strongly. So that said, I'm going to jump into my part of what I'm sharing, which is the 4 keys to a great micro school. Tom and Lorian, anything that you need to throw in before I jump in?
You're rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I am going to share these 4 keys with you. I'm going to spend the vast majority of the time that I'm talking to you on the first one, which is the environment. And there are 3 pieces that I'm going to talk about in the environment. They will be the ratio of adults to kids, individualized learning, and emotional safety. And all 3 of those sort of intertwine with each other. So I'll come back to that. I do want to say that outside of like meeting those parameters of what happens in a micro school, by far the next most important thing, the key to like making it all work is the efficacy of the adults in the room. And Lorian is going to share a lot later about what that looks like, what we see as the characteristic skills and traits of somebody who is very effective in a micro school. And so even, you know, you could have a terrible space, you could have like no curriculum, you could have like whatever. And if
Sometimes
you
a terrible space and no curriculum are the best space and the best learning
yeah,
opportunity.
that's totally true. But you can have all those things and not and be in and have just this incredible experience because the adult is so capable of connecting with kids in that way. And so that is why that is like, and so that's you or somebody you're going to hire. And that's what's really exciting is you get to like, you get to control that. Conversely, you could have the best space in the world, the most state of the art, everything. And with the person that is not aligned to this experience, it won't go well. Kids won't feel the things they need to feel in order to feel safe. The next key that is really important is family buy-in and involvement. Whatever it is you want to offer and you want to be in your micro school, it's imperative that you can communicate that to parents very transparently, even if it makes you afraid you're never going to find anybody who wants to be in your school. I did a little brochure and I put in there that I want to teach kids survival skills. And I say things like, we're going to learn how to use hatchets and fire and knives. And there are parents that don't want to be in my micro school because it's a little, you know, I feel like the more transparent you are, the more aligned your the parents that you're working with will be, and the easier your life will be. Like most micro school founders will say, the kids are not what is hard for me, it's the parents. And that is a matter of transparency in what you're doing and ensuring that parents are wanting what they say they're wanting, which sometimes you can't really like gauge that. But the more transparent you get, the more uncomfortable they will be if it's not the fit that they want. And so that's a really important piece. The last thing is, what are we teaching and how are we teaching it? I don't use the term curriculum because when I say the word curriculum, people sort of like narrow their focus into a set of textbooks or an online tool or something like that. And what we're saying is like, what is your learning philosophy? How do you think kids learn best? And what types of tools will meet that? Then find a curriculum or a set of like a Frankenstein of curricula that do what it is you think is best for kids, instead of saying, here's my curriculum, I'm now going to try to fit my learning philosophy into this curriculum. That is going to be a lot less successful. It's easier up front, but it is so much harder down the road when you realize that your kids aren't getting things the way you want them to. So those are the 4 keys. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my share and jump into these 3 aspects of environment. The first one I want to talk about is the ratio of adults to kids. And the piece here that I think matters most is in our view, and there are views that are different than this. I visited an Acton Academy recently, and they have a literal opposite view to this, and I can see where they're coming from. So I'm not saying that. So just know there are other ways to look at this philosophically. The way they do the opposite of this is with a lot of detail and structure and, you know, and intention. So I'm going to give you what we believe is a way for the majority of people who like sort of fit this opportunity to do this successfully. And one of the most important parts is when you think about why ratios matter. When the way we talk about ratios, we're going to say somewhere between 1 adult to 8 to 12 students, 6 to 12 in some situations. Lorian prefers 8 at a max. Tom can do 12. And I currently have 15, but I also have a 14-year-old assistant, an 82-year-old assistant, some mental health support, some support in the kitchen, so it's also that, like, if you need to stretch it. So the reason that this matters, or the thing to be thinking about, is how many children can I have a one-on-one relationship with at the same time? Once I cross that threshold, and every single person is different, and it'll be different depending on your set of kids. You might have a student who is like 3 students in their need, and you might have a student that's like 0.3 students, like they have no need. They're so like self-directed and efficient, and they can do their thing. So just know there's like variability in this. There is an equation I talk about, and it is that the capacity of the adults must be greater than or equal to the sum of the needs of the students. And so you can have a student that tips you, and then every day you end your day just like exhausted. And, if you can end your day with any energy left, you're inside that equation. And if you're teaching in a traditional classroom right now, it's impossible. And so if you feel just smoked at the end of every day, it's not you, it's the system. Like
it's that you're being asked to have a relationship with 150 kids every day
or 30 or whatever it is. So when we talk about this this ability to connect, once you cross that threshold, you have to go into sort of a herd mentality, traditional classroom management. So if you're really great at traditional classroom management and you come into this space, you probably need to set most of it down, because kids, traditional classroom management is, how well can I control a room full of children and get them to be compliant? That really is quality classroom management. And when we're in a micro school, I don't want compliant kids. I want independently thinking kids, which is a nightmare in a public school setting. Like, you can't have it. You can't have kids that are independently thinking, because then you can't run your system. So just be thinking about how things are going to shift when you do this. So when you think about your ratios, whatever you think your capacity is, the first round of running your micro school, probably go 1 or 2 students less than that. Get rolling a little bit. Make sure that that's true. And then one thing that will happen is, if you run your micro school well, all of the parents in your micro school will start recruiting kids for you. And not even because, and you don't have to tell them to, because they'll be talking to their friends about what's happening for their kids. I have a mom that she texted me, and she's like, all my kids' friends and cousins keep running up to me and going, is it true that Johnny gets to, his actual name is Johnny. I know that's the name we use. But he's like, is it true that Johnny gets to carve during school and bring his pocket knife? Yes, that's true. Is it true that, so do a great job, and you won't have a problem filling your micro school, because the children in your micro school will be the advertisement of your micro school. When you think about this ratio thing, just you know what you're capable of. And the other thing I will say is, if you're in a location that there isn't public funding, like an ESA or a voucher or anything like that, and you're serving a community of families that don't have, they are in financial distress, and you need to make a living because you're not independently wealthy, you may need to stretch those ratios a little bit. I will say, the best way, if you need to do that, is to do things like I've done. I pay a 14-year-old $200 a month to intern in my micro school, and she functions almost as an adult. I have a woman who's 82 that just loves me and wants to be helpful. So find the people in your life that either love kids or love you, and invite them into supporting in some way with the things that they love. And you'll be able to so if you need to have 20 kids and you can't hire another teacher, bring some other people in that don't cost you a lot, but bring a lot of value into that space. Okay, so that's our first one. I'm gonna have to talk fast. The second one is individualized learning. I'm gonna tell you about a kid named Mo, because I love to talk about Mo. It's been this was in January of 2019. I had the opportunity to substitute for it was a long-term sub for maternity leave with a group of fifth and sixth grade boys. There were 7 fifth and sixth grade boys, and in the loft of somebody's house. And I had already, like, when I heard about microschools, the first day that I heard about it, which was in fall of 2018, I was just like, that emoji where the brain is exploded, that was me 100%. And I was like, this is it. I was homeschooled in the early 80s. I'd found Montessori for my own kids. I've worked in public, private, and charter. I want independent children. That's what I wanted for my own kids who are now older teenagers. And so it just like aligned very, like it was the thing I'd been looking for and hadn't found. And then I went and did this long-term something, and it cemented inside my heart forever the power of this learning environment and what can happen for kids. And I'm going to tell you about 2 of them. So one is Mo. Mo was a 5th grader. We were using Khan Academy as our math tool. He was in 3rd. He was at 30% of 3rd grade, beginning of 2nd semester, 5th grade. Every other kid in the class was on or above, at or above grade level in their math and their ELA tools. So Mo felt like he was dumb. Like he was inside of him. He had a fixed version of himself that he was dumb. And I got in touch with his mom to, like, is there something cognitive that hasn't been identified? And she explained that he had been in a couple different schools previous to this, and they didn't emphasize academics. They had other things that were beneficial. But so Mo and I sat down and I said, Mo, this is not about your brain. The adults in your life have not given you the tools to have this set of skills. Like, you can do this. It's going to take work. For whatever reason, Mo listened and he heard me, and he got permission, took his computer at home to home at night and on the weekends. And he'd come back and he's like, I got a percent. And it's not like all of a sudden math got easy for him. He worked so hard, but he decided to do it. He saw where he was academically, and he wanted to be in a different place. And by the time he finished that semester, he was more than halfway through 4th grade. So he'd done more than a course in a semester. He transferred into a different micro school that was inside of an elementary school in 6th grade, ran for student body president in a brand new school, but had learned in his micro school how to make videos. So he made a campaign video and was the co-student body president of this school that he was a new student in. And I went to visit him in the middle of his 6th grade year, and they were talking about this other kid, and they were saying he was their go-to for math and for English. And I said, who's your go-to for math? And the entire class was like, Mo. And he was then in 7th grade. And just like, it was trajectory changing for his entire life. Because if you've ever had a child who feels dumb in something, it leaks into everything. And they just become, their identity is dumb kid. And Mo's incredibly intelligent, but he had no evidence of that, or was finding evidence to reinforce that for himself. And he needed somebody to tell him something different. And once he had that, he just like totally took off. Individualized learning is about, where is this child in their learning? If you have a 5th grader who needs to do 3rd grade, we go back and fill in those gaps. I was a high school geometry teacher, and rarely did my kids have a problem with geometry concepts. It was almost always gaps from 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, not being able to compute fractions, integers, whatever it was, quickly enough. And so individualized learning is about creating foundations that are solid, that they can build on, and then have the confidence to continue to move forward, and also meeting them in their passions. When you create a space where kids get to, at school, do something they really care about, if you create time in your schedule for their own passion projects, they will be excited to be there every day. And one of the things that I have decided that my 2 greatest jobs in this running a micro school, one is to help them increase their self-love, like their version of themselves. And 2 is to get so creative that they want to do the things they need to do. And that it's easier to be like, just do your whatever. And in this situation, it's like, no, I want to create a way for them to want to do this thing that they really need to do. So in recap, ratios, individualized learning. The last thing I want to talk about is emotional safety. And so I'm in that micro school with these 5th and 6th grade boys. I have a mom call me, And she says, I heard about this. My son Sean is in 6th grade. He is dyslexic. He has dyslexia. He reads between a 1st and 2nd grade level. At the time, we didn't have like early elementary curriculum. And so I said, I don't know if this is a fit for him, given those parameters, but so don't enroll him, just start bringing him in and let's see what happens. Sean and I talked about his dyslexia, his brain. I asked him permission to talk to the class about his brain, and sort of got some help to create an analogy that would help them understand what dyslexia does or is. And had that conversation with the class, knowing that they were going to know that he was working in 1st or 2nd grade math and English. And 2 really beautiful things happened that I want to tell you. One is, end of week 1, he gets in the car, and his mom asked him how it was, and he's like, Mom, they like me. He had been homeschooling since 4th grade, because school was destroying his soul. So he had not had a social outlet where he could like connect to people and outside of his family. And that was massive for him. The other thing that happened is, when I first got there, we created I saw some stagnancy. They had daily goal setting in their program, and it felt stagnant. And the sort of recommended goal was 1% of Khan Academy per day, which meant they would do about a course and a half in a year's time. So it was already accelerated. And I said to them, let's make a collective goal. There are 7 of you. Let's figure out. So that's all I said. And they talked through it, and they decided that they were going to do 2% a day. Each of them was going to do 2% a day. So without any real provocation, they doubled their math output. Then they did the math and they said, okay, there's this many of us, it's this many days, this many percent, came up with the number, created this really not uniform chart of squares with that many in it. Because why would you use a yardstick to do something like that? And put it on the wall. And every time somebody got a percent, they would go, I got a percent in Khan. And the whole class would respond in the way that they had set out for themselves. So one kid would be like, I got a percent. And we'd go, dude, like all in a chorus. So there was this like celebration of success. So then they would go fill in a square. The thing that was the most exciting to me was this one kid named Riley, who is a senior, and his struggles were not academic. He was a 6th grader working in 8th grade math. His were social. And his mom, I have a text from his mom in the last year that talks about what the micro school did for him socially. And he's doing great in his life as a senior. When Riley would go up and fill in his square, as a 6th grader, having done a percent in 8th grade math, he would be celebrated the same as Sean, who's a 6th grader working in 2nd grade math. That is emotional safety. And when you can create that, kids will learn and nothing will stop them. That's all I'm going to share about the 4 keys to a great micro school. I'm going to hand this over to Tom. He's going to talk to us about the micro school sketchpad. I'm not going to spend too much time introducing Tom. I just will say that we've worked together for a long time. He is a phenomenal human who is persistently like seeking growth and wanting to become the most expanded version of himself, as emotionally expanded version of himself as he can. So Tom, take it away.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, so I want to introduce you guys to hopefully a practical tool that you can use over and over and over again on your micro school journey, and also sit down with different people. And the idea is to quickly map out what are the basic things that we need to be able to put together a micro school for kids, a great learning space for kids. This is a little bit of a graphic organizer, slightly more structured than a back of the napkin business plan. Okay. And it actually leads into a more advanced business tool that we can work with you on, called the Micro School Blueprint, that helps you map out all the pieces of your micro school journey as you go through the startup process. I'm going to share my screen if I can. Let me see. Okay. Now, ideally, you should have received an email with a PDF copy of the Micro School Sketchpad in it. If you have not, don't worry. It's a very simple graphic organizer that you can put together on the back of a random piece of paper sitting on your desk. Okay. But you will see as I zoom out just a little bit here, this document is 4 boxes, or a piece of paper divided into quadrants with a box in the middle. And so again, we're going to look at 4 main areas that you need to have in order to start a micro school. This is certainly not all that's required, but if you can fill in these 4 boxes, you've got what it takes to do the basics. Okay. Where I want to start is right in the middle. This is the why. Why do you want to start a micro school, right? So following in the footsteps of Simon Sinek, who has probably the most watched TED Talk of all time, Start with Why. I want to ask you a very profound, why do you want to start a micro school? And I'm going to ask you in just a minute, pause the video and stop and think about that. And I mean, really think about it. Why do you want to start a micro school? And jot down the most compelling reason. What of all the things that you could be doing with your time, why this? Why is this the thing that matters? So go ahead and pause that video and write that down. Okay. Welcome back. If you paused your video, if not, let's just keep rolling. The micro school sketchpad is designed into 4 key areas: your learners, your location, your learning coach, and your learning model. Okay, so everything is centered around your learners. That's the idea. Everything is centered around the learners. Excuse me. So let's start there. The first thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to describe the kind of families that you would like to have in your micro school. As you're building a micro school, specifically trying to serve a small group of students, 5 to 10 students, you can be extremely niche in the kind of student that you're trying to serve. Do all of your students love Lego robotics? Do all of your students experience struggles with dyslexia? Do all of your students speak a language that is not widely known within the community? Or do they all share a very similar cultural background that you can emphasize in the micro school? Like, these are all things that you can do to cater to the needs of your small group of students. Who are they? Who are the students? Who are the families? What are families looking for in an educational environment? How are you going to meet their needs? What makes those families and those students excited about your micro school? I'm going to ask you again to pause in just a moment. Don't take too long. Give yourself 2 or 3 minutes. Constraints. Okay. Give yourself constraints here. 2 or 3 minutes and think about who my students are. Are they geographically centered? Am I serving a broad area? Are they rural? Are they urban? Who are they? What do you know? Write down everything you can about them and how you're going to meet their needs. Okay. Come back when you're done with that. And we're going to jump into the next section, which is your learning model. All right. Moving into your learning model. Now that you know the students that you're building this for, describe the kinds of learning activities that you would like to see in your micro school. You may have come from a background in education where you had to take courses in pedagogical theory and philosophies of education, and you might know all the big fancy words, and that's great and fine. And if you have what you feel to be a cohesive philosophy of education and you want to build on that, fantastic. If you have never spent a day in the classroom in your life other than as a student, and you don't know all the fancy words like pedagogy and things like that, you're fine starting where you're at. What are the kind of activities you want to see kids doing? It doesn't require a ton of background in education to say, I want to see kids giggling as they read a book with a friend, right? I want to see kids identifying plants as we go through on a nature walk, right? You can see what kinds of activities those are, no matter what your background is. So describe 3 or 4 different scenes that you envision as part of your micro school. Maybe there's some existing programs out there that you want to copy, emulate, model, build upon. These might be large international organizations. It might be a micro school that exists on the other side of the country from you, right? There's some phenomenal micro schools that do great stuff in their local community. They are not everywhere. Reach out to them and tell them, I would love to do what you're doing in my own community. And 9 times out of 10, they'll be thrilled and help you do it. Okay. So think about what your learning model looks like. Think about the activities you're going to be doing. Think about the why behind you're doing these things. Go ahead and pause and write these pieces down just a little bit. Not in detail, just jot down some bullet notes or some keywords, and then rejoin us as we go look at our learning environment in just a minute. Okay. When it comes to the learning environment of a micro school, this is one of my favorite parts about micro schools. You can be so much more flexible in where your micro school meets. In many locations, micro schools just meet in someone's residence. They meet in their home. I happen to be coming to you from Arizona, where the vast majority of micro schools are in someone's home. But we also have friends running micro schools all across the country, out of churches, community centers, libraries, outdoor tents, community parks, like some really awesome and fun ways to be able to help kids get the education that they need. Okay. So think about where for you would hold a micro school. If you're not sure if you could do it in your home, don't worry. We'll provide you with some resources later on in this meeting that can help you make that determination. But if you're willing and able to, that's generally going to be the most cost-effective way to do this. So if that's an option for you, great. If it's not an option for you, think about where else you might be able to do this. Could I run a micro school out of my church? Could I run a micro school out of a church where I'm not a member of the congregation, but it serves the same community that I'm trying to serve? A lot of churches are honestly very amenable to those kinds of arrangements. Community centers, even sharing a business location with another business that's youth oriented, a karate dojo, a dance studio, anything of that nature. A lot of times their spaces sit empty during the school day because they're catering to the after school market. So work something out with them so that you can use that space during the school day. And oftentimes your students will join right in with their students and engage in so it's beneficial for both parties involved. Okay. Now, I don't just want to talk about the big location. I want to talk about what goes into the location as well. So think about the kind of specialty use spaces that you might need or that you might now have access to, and how that could shape your curriculum or your learning model. If you really want to engage in project-based learning, do you have a project area that kids could use? If you want to have a nature-based learning model, do you have access to nature where you're located? You want kids to be able to cook? Do you have access to a kitchen or a food prep area? Okay. So think about what these spaces are and go ahead and pause the video and jot some ideas down. And I know you probably are like swirling with ideas at this point. That's fantastic. Jot them all down. You can narrow this down later. The idea here is to get ideas out on paper and then focus down on what we really want and what works together as a cohesive unit. Like I said before, you may do 3 or 4 of these and map out a design for 3 or 4 different micro schools and run one of them. And then run another, or hire someone else to run another, or find a friend that really wants to do this as well. And you've already got a head start for them. Okay. So go ahead, jot those ideas down, and we'll join you looking at our learning coach in just a second. Okay. this is the last piece of the puzzle, and that is who is going to be working with students. So I want to point out we've got 4 things. We need students, we need a location where the learning happens, we need something to be learning, and we need a responsible adult who can help in the learning. Notice that I didn't call this person a teacher, and I didn't label them as the educator, right? Because it's a very different mindset that happens within a micro school. As Rochelle mentioned, giving kids a lot more autonomy, focusing on emotional safety, and the environment is very different. So what are the skills and the characteristics that you think will be needed by the adult in the room in order to support the kind of learners that you're building this for, manage the learning environment, and run the type of learning model that you're designing here? If it's going to be you, put your name in the box. Yes, I am the learning coach. If it's not you and you're going to hire someone else to run the micro school on your behalf, start jotting down ideas of who you might consider. And it may be someone that you don't know at this point in time. So it's really critical to write down what you're looking for. What are the skills and the characteristics that you're going to be hiring for? Helping someone catch your vision of what you're trying to do, you can communicate that. Persuading someone that their heart needs to be changed in order to work in this space, that's a little bit more challenging. Okay. So these are the 4 key areas to designing and building a micro school. After you have these 4 key pieces in place, you've got 90% of the work done. Now, of course, there's some business stuff and there's some legal regulatory compliance things that need to be taken care of. But often this is all that it takes to get started, or to start talking with people, or to start building your community of really joining this micro school movement and helping kids in your community find a better learning environment. Ideally, after you've built all of these 4 pieces out, you get back to your why. Why do you want to start a micro school? Are these 4 elements helping to accomplish that why for you? If you ever want to talk, let's dig in a little bit more. We'll schedule some time, and we can dig into all these pieces. But I'm going to wrap up my discussion of the micro school sketchpad there. Hopefully you get good use out of this tool, and we'll see you later.
Tom's still here. He's not going
I am still here. I'm sorry.
he like I want to talk just really briefly about a really cool resource that we recommend for anybody that's running a micro school. It's called Yes Legal. We will send you the link in the follow-up email once you've watched this video. And you can also Google Yes Legal. The reason I'm not telling you, it's a yeslegal.zendesk.com/hc/en-us. So it's not,
You can go to,
write it. Like, it's not an easy one to just, so Google Yes Legal and you can find them, you register with them. What I want to tell you about them is basically there are organizations in the United States that care a lot about innovative education environments and are willing to invest in that in a philanthropic way. And one of the things they recognize is that one of the greatest hurdles for people wanting to start is legal ramifications. What are legal parameters and ramifications? And so what they've done is they've hired a few attorneys who have started to create a database for each and every state in the United States. Some states, they have a more robust profile of what it looks like in that state. The really beautiful thing is this is a free service. So they will not be your legal counsel, but they will be able to give you advice and walk you through what the laws are in your state. One of the things I really like about them is they're not going to be like, and you have to adhere to these laws. Sometimes you can fly under the radar for a period of time or for a really long time. Sometimes you can't. And knowing knowing which way to go on those kinds of things, depending on your appetite for risk, I guess, is one way to look at that. Like how, and also the other thing that is going to impact this is your municipality. If you're trying to operate in an HOA, you know, there are things that you kind of need to really be aware of. HOA is one of the biggest risks for being shut down. Like they have the legal ground, generally speaking. And so, but we have seen really successful micro schools run inside of HOAs because they have that relationship with their HOA and their neighbors. Anyway, I digress from Yes Legal, but the whole point is, one of the first things we will tell you, regardless of what state you're in, is set up an appointment, reach out, contact Yes Legal, tell them what state you're in, and ask them for whatever information they can give you about the regulatory environment of your state. And also, you know, if there is funding, they may have some understanding about that as well. So I strongly recommend utilizing this tool, particularly because it's free. And if you were to try to hire an attorney to do this, they would be like, what are you talking about? And they would
You will never find another attorney that is going to encourage you to start a micro school. You won't.
That's so true. That's actually really true. But they're going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so it's going to cost you a lot for me to figure out what you're talking about. And so this is a way to just at least have a starting point on the legalities of what's going on in your state. So just wanted to introduce Yes Legal. We want to introduce Iman Aline, a dear friend of mine and ours that she and I met 5 or 6 years ago. And in that first phone call, we're like, we have to figure out how to work together. And she is rocking it in Florida and other places in the micro school world and just having a massive impact, particularly for founders and kids of color and LGBTQ kids. And just like this very, very important, that's what she got on. And she's like, we're doing the Lord's work. And it's just like, it's so, what we're doing matters so much. And Iman brings an energy that is so powerful and so unique. I'm going to let her introduce herself. But she's a spectacular human being.
Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. No matter how many times you do that, it sounds amazing. So I appreciate you. I love Rochelle. I love Tom. I love Lorianne. I love you guys so much. Thanks for having me. I'll jump right in. I do have a PowerPoint so that my ADD brain can stay focused. If not,
with this, all 4 of us have ADD. So
I know. Like anyone else watching, if you like, this is gonna keep me focused, y'all. Can everybody see my screen? Can we see my screen?
Yes.
Now we can.
Yay!
We got
Okay,
screenception for a minute there, but we're doing good.
All right. Thank you. All right. So this is called Money in Your Micro School. If you follow me anywhere, I talk about money so much, and I try to change the conversation around it. So that's what we're going to talk about a bit today. This is kind of our agenda. This is me. I'm not going to read this to you because it's right there, but I will kind of give you the highlights of it. I am an author, best-selling in some accords. I am a speaker, and I'm really an advocate for learners. My backstory, I will tell very, very quickly. I grew up in a very expensive suburb in Westchester, New York. I did not know that it was one of the highest incomes counties in the country as I was growing up, but kind of started realizing that as I got older. We were actually in low income housing. They put this building in this town because the goal was to try to make it a little bit more diverse. And that's where I ended up. Beautiful building, awesome people, awesome kids, had a great childhood. Got to about, I had Vanessa Williams as my orchestra and my music teacher, my singing and chorus teacher. So that was great. That's Vanessa Williams' mom. And then I played the flute, I played the piccolo. I had access to all of these just incredible things, great education system. Then I got to high school and I was very, very smart. I was always tracked with the kids that were very smart. But I was incredibly bored. And I got to the point that I started saying to myself, okay, I really don't need chemistry. And I know I don't need chemistry. So why am I being forced to take chemistry to graduate? I'm never going to take this thing. So I got bored. I fell in with the wrong crowd and I started doing drugs. And I became an addict, and I ended up going to rehab twice. I was in jail twice, and I was in a mental health facility once, between the ages of about, I want to say 13 to 18. I dropped out of high school, and my mom was tired of my nonsense. And she was also tired of the New York cold. So she decided to move us to Florida. And that was kind of the turning point in my life. I got to Florida and I was working at Outback Steakhouse, and my friends that were there too were all college students, and they were going to a school called the Art Institute at that point. And I remember asking them, like, wait a second, so you go to college for something that you enjoy, like you're in school and you're learning something that you want to learn. Nobody had ever sat down and had the college talk with me. They didn't think that I was the type to go to college, of course. And once I heard that you can go to college and do things you like to do, I was like, oh, wait a second, like that sounds like fun. I like to learn. I just want to learn what I want to learn. So from that day forward, I basically became a college student for the next 8 years. I got my associates, I got my bachelor's, I got my master's in school counseling. My goal was I want to give back. I also became certified in elementary education and in special education because those were the kids that I felt like really needed it most. So from about day one, though, I had recognized that the school system was not serving kids. And at the same time, my son had actually started VPK, which is voluntary pre-K for 4-year-olds. And I made sure that I chose a preschool that aligned with the philosophy of education, should be hands-on, should be really fun, should be really engaging, especially at 4 years old. And I started seeing things like the teacher would force him to write 3 sentences before he would go play at 4 years old. And I just knew that wasn't right. And I felt really strongly about that. And then I started seeing teachers at the school I worked at just yelling at kids and just being very, very frustrated all the time, being overwhelmed with their caseload of having to, have these high scores on tests. The kids were testing every week. Kids were being screamed at for talking too loud in the lunchroom during the only time they could talk. They were losing recess. And I was just like, my kid was hating school. He was crying every day. I was hating school, being a teacher at school. And I just decided that was it. So we pulled him and we started homeschooling. And from that day, that's when I recognized that, people are doing education and this is the way that education can be done. So I saw a lot of hands-on learning. I saw a lot of teachers that had left teaching to homeschool their kids. I saw a lot of field trips and learning through experience. And I was like, this is the way that education should be done. At that time, the word microschool was starting to pop up. I think there was one book written at that time about 7 years ago about microschools, and I read it and devoured it and said to myself, this is something I want to do. So about within a year, I opened a microschool. It was a 2-day drop-off at that point, the first microschool in Broward that I know of that called ourselves microschool. And from there, we just kind of grew. I don't like to go into like the whole entire story. COVID happened, we went online, opened an online school, got really popular there. And then people just started noticing how personalized and how kind of like awesome what we were doing was. And we ended up winning the Vela grant and then ended up becoming semifinals for the YAS prize, which is a very prestigious like program that we won prize. And I was like, okay, this is good. So people started noticing. And ever since then, it's just been kind of like a whirlwind of us being able to talk and lead about education. So that is a story about who I am. And I hope that was as fast as I try to make it as usual. Can you guys still see my screen okay and everything? I try to like bounce back. Yes?
Yeah, I think just leave it on your screen share because it's doubling with the.
Oh, okay, you get the mirror. Okay, I hope that's okay. All right, so here is back to our presentation. That is my story. And why I talk about money. So before we even get into the money talk, I'd like for you to take a minute. If you want, you can pause this recording and close your eyes and think about how you feel about the word money when I say it. What kind of things come up for you? Is it a good feeling, excitement, or is it like an icky feeling? Take note of those feelings and maybe write them down if you'd like. All righty. So if you did that practice, you now kind of have a feeling around how you experience money. A lot of us have some negative experiences around money, and I like to talk about that and kind of get our mindsets changed around money if I can. So that's what I do. If you have any icky feelings around money, a few things that I always tell people to do is before you even open a business, make sure you feel comfortable with handling money. Make sure you feel comfortable with your business being successful, make sure you don't have what I call wealth blocks. Wealth blocks are basically limiting beliefs around the psychology of how much money you can generate. If you do not think you can generate money, then your school will not be successful. And I did that for years and ended up going into $40,000 worth of debt. So I already know like how not to do it. So now one of my big things is to try to teach other people how to make sure that they don't go into that kind of debt. So if you do have, like I said, any negative feelings around money, clearing your wealth blocks is a very big, important thing. Affirmations are great. Look in the mirror every day. I'm capable of making money. I'm capable of having a successful micro school. I'm capable of my business generating whatever goal you have in mind, whether it's $5,000 a month to $50,000 a month. Start feeling very comfortable about saying that. The more your affirmations feel kind of icky because you feel like you can't generate that level of income, the more you need to do that work around it, okay? And I have some other things that I share with Rochelle. If you want it, I'm pretty sure she'll send it to you if you ask after the video. All right, so now to kind of like the reality things, like the things that are like here. So today we're gonna talk about startup. We're gonna talk about generating income, accessing funds, and budgeting, okay? So on to the next page. All right, so startup phase. I always look at Lorianne and I always ask her, how much does it really take to start a micro school? Because I think if she's similar to me, we started ours like $100. Like you really can start off your micro school with very, very minimal amount of money. The way that we do it is kind of like using the things that we have. I started as a nature school. We only bought a few things for the kids to play with, but that was really it. Can you start with more money? After my first micro school where we were in nature all the time, we actually did move into a building. That building did, for the startup, cost us about maybe $30,000. So you can really have about $0 to start up to about $30,000. I know that's a big range, but in all reality, I would say on average about $500, depending on where you're at. If you do it out of your house, $500 is generally more than enough for you to start up. If you do it out of a building, then you're going to be paying more because you generally have to pay a deposit, things like that, and buy furniture, things of that nature. But it really will range based off of the kind of school that you want. All right, so that's startup. I do like to talk about saving towards your micro school. If you're a teacher and you're thinking about starting this micro school, let's say in 6 months or so, a great idea is for you to start putting money away for your micro school anyway, because although your startup phase, you may not need a whole lot in the beginning, once you have students, a lot of times you want to buy things for those students, and having some cushion is a great idea. So even if it's putting away $50 a week out of your paycheck that you're getting regular money, it's a great idea. Okay, budgeting. If you've never budgeted before, it's definitely something to kind of get acquainted with. I made a very, very simple budget. I'm going to share this and you guys tell me, can you see that budget? Can we all see it? I can't see you,
Yes.
so
Yep, you
Yes.
got it.
perfect. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. All right, so this is the simple budget that I have here. The idea is that I generally, this is my tuition, my $1,000 a month. That's not what we charge now. I wanted to give you just a nice round number. Your number can be very different. People always ask me, how do I set my number? And I always say to them, I usually look at what other people are doing in the area or what other private schools are in the area, and then I try to set my number about right in the middle. The other day, I came up with another idea that basically talks about the fact that I set really how much money I have to make and then kind of like how much I'm going to have to spend and then try to like shoot a number that is $1,000 more than that a month so that I always have a cushion going. So for example, it's basically just working backwards. I would write up my budget, how much money I expect to spend out each month. And then I would make sure that I add $1,000 on top of that of how much money I need to have and then how many students I need to have. I'd basically say, okay, well, for example, if I need to have, let's say, $15,000 coming in per month, then I know that I need at least 15 students at $1,000 each. So sometimes that means that you're not really looking at the places around you and what they're doing. Then you can't be as competitive, but sometimes it's okay to not look at what other people are doing and just go with exactly what you need. And that might be helpful for your own budget because sometimes you might undercut yourself by doing that. And some people might want something that's more, that's in a different price range. So you might be set that way. Either way. So for example, the way that I set up my budget, let's say $1,000 is what I'm charging for my tuition. And I know I'm going to have 10 students, or my goal is to have 10 students. This is called projected income. This is not regular, I know this is the money's coming in. This is what I'm guessing. I'm making an estimate or an educated guess. So monthly, I know I have $10,000 coming in. At the top, I always put myself and how much money I want to make from that micro school. I do that because if you don't do that, you will fall into the same trap that most business owners and most especially educators and micro school owners fall into by not paying yourself. I always make sure that I am a line item on there and that I'm getting paid. If you do not, I promise you, you get burned out very quickly. It is not a very conducive way to do things, okay? I like to have an assistant line there, and then you just put in the line items of everything else that you plan to have, okay? This is my total amount of expenses that I have on here is about $8,000. And then this is how much I can have as a cushion or towards savings. If you know you're going to upgrade to a new building or you want to purchase a van or anything like that, this is the money that you can have saving towards that kind of thing, or any emergencies that happen. You want to have a cushion. So basically all I did was I said, this is the amount of money that I have coming in monthly, subtract the amount that I have going out, and this is the amount of money that I have left over. And that is how you do a very simple budget, okay? All right, moving back to budgeting. All right, I made sure that we talked about all that. Beautiful. All right, moving into generating income. So this is a really this is a gem. Whenever you are deciding to start a micro school, especially if you're like, okay, I know this is going to be a 6-month thing down the line or whatever it is, you can start building your business now and generating income. You can do workshops. You can do caregiver in me classes, which is basically like mommy and me or daddy and me, family and me, and the parents would come with the learner. You can charge for that. A lot of people like to do like enrichment science classes for kids. You could do tutoring. If you're already an educator, you already know how to tutor. You can also do founding family rates, which is basically just saying, hey, if you register with me now, you can have a certain decrease in the amount of tuition you pay during the school year. And a lot of people will sign up early, so that way they can make sure that they save money during the school year, okay? So that's a great way to have a big chunk of money coming in, especially if you're gonna be going into a space that costs a little bit more money. But those are really keys. I always talk about another school founder that on every Saturday for a year, she would do science classes in the park, and people just started coming to her, and she gained her micro school by the time she started was pretty much full because she had been doing these classes all throughout this, all before she started. So it was a great way to get her name out there, and it was a great way to get money. Okay, accessing funds. So this is basically money that you're not necessarily coming out of your own pocket with. And fundraising is one key thing. There's a website called Spot Fund that I love to use that basically you just put it out there and people are able to add the amount of money that they want to. I generally say try to tell people that you're fundraising specifically for something, books, or for specific types of video games or whatever it is that you want in your school, a technology center. They like to know that it's going towards something tangible that they can see, not just this broad idea of a school. Grants are out there. I didn't get my first grant until 6 years in, but I also really didn't apply for any. Now I think there's much more money kind of being given out. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Prize is out there. Bela Fund is out there now. Stand Together. Who else just gave? Getting Smart is giving out some funding. So look into different funding programs that do offer grants. There's some small business grants might be in your community that you can offer, that you can get. And the next thing kind of goes along with grants or prizes. Pitch contests are a big thing nowadays where you learn how to pitch. Basically, that's you being able to talk about what your school is going to be like, and they might give you a $500 or $1,000 or something like that towards this idea. You get up on stage, you talk about it, and you might win a prize for doing that if your idea is something that the judges like. Personal loans are now becoming a thing that I'm starting to see people take out more and more. I only highly suggest taking out personal loans if you have the money and if you know you're going to have the money to pay it back, because it is one of those things that it is still a loan, and just being careful with your credit is super important. Or credit cards. I use credit cards. That's how I got into $40,000 worth of debt. I didn't have a way that I was going to pay it back. So I definitely just suggest that you know how you plan on recouping that loss if you do, because you're always going to be in debt if you don't pay it back. Business loans. I haven't seen anyone personally take a business loan out for a micro school as of yet. They are generally a little bit more challenging to access business loans. But what you can end up doing is if you can access a business loan, the payback time is usually a lot faster, especially if you don't have real estate with it. So usually for much smaller schools, it's just a little bit more challenging to have the profit margin it's going to take to pay yourself and pay back this loan if you take out a big loan. Business loans are usually much bigger and they want their money back a lot faster. Not impossible, just one of the ones that we've never really had to do because we've never had a huge amount of money that we needed to borrow or felt like we needed to go that route, but it's definitely something out there. Last but not least are ESAs, vouchers, charters. Any of these things are basically usually state. We have educational savings accounts now is what they're called. Most states have or passing or trying to pass a bill that makes sure that money follows the child. And that's usually how you get the ESA funding. So for example, Florida is what I like to throw out there. They get homeschool students get like $7,000 every year to use towards their homeschooling. And usually that means that they can use it towards a micro school like ours. And that's how they end up at least supplementing their tuition. So every state is different. So I'm not going to go over each and every state, but every state, a lot of states now have a lot of voucher programs. Some don't, but if you just look up your state and like homeschooling grants or homeschooling funding or micro school funding, you should be able to find some things, okay? Charters are usually for like charter schools. If you're gonna open a charter school, which is usually a little bit more challenging, especially in Florida, you can usually get funding for charter schools too. And I think that's it. Any questions, you can feel free to reach out to Rochelle. Anything from you guys that you wanna share or anything I missed?
I love that so much. Thank you for everything you shared. The one thing I will throw out is I was introduced to an organization, Kiva.
Oh yes, I don't keep
and they do business loans between $1,000 and $15,000. You have to find people that will help. Like it's basically crowdsourcing loans, but they're zero interest. And so they seem to me like a pretty good fit for
what we do. They usually work with like preschools. I've seen them.
Because you can do startup, you can do it for your startup funding as long, to Iman's point, as long as you know you're going to have, so it's just kiva.org. Anyway, Iman, this was spectacular. Thank you so much for joining us. And
I love you guys. Yay. Thank you so much,
Have a good
guys.
one.
Have a great day. Bye. Thanks for having me.
See ya. We're going to now have Lorian present. I'm very excited about this. Lorian is fierce. She's a fierce defender of humans that are often not like overlooked or not given what they need. And I don't know, she's been educating kids for longer than she wants to admit. And I'm going to have her share with us about the adults in the room.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about something that we call the alchemy of success. And we've chosen the word alchemy very specifically. If you're familiar with alchemy at all, it is kind of this predecessor to chemistry. At a time when we were really interested in taking base metals and turning them into something more precious than the materials that you started with. And I think that really speaks to what we have seen in our own experiences helping others start micro schools, that there is this particular alchemy that can come together to create something greater than its original parts. And that alchemy can look different from micro school to micro school, and from micro school leader to micro school leader. Everyone brings a little bit something different to the table to create their own alchemy. And so today what I offer you is this kind of self-assessment. So this really is meant to be for your personal reflection. It's not about particular score that leads you to kind of a rubric of you should do this or you shouldn't do this, but rather an opportunity to reflect on the skills that you have and the skills that might be useful to you in running your micro school. And so as we go through this self-assessment, I'm going to offer you a scale for each of the kind of categories that we talk about to rate yourself on. So grab a piece of scrap paper, or if you're taking notes, get ready to just allot kind of a scale representation of each of these topics. And we'll go ahead and jump in. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
I know. I always do the thumbs up, forgetting you're looking at a different screen right now.
So the very first category that we're going to look at is kind of a dichotomy between curiosity and judgment. And the reason that we've chosen these characteristics to be part of our self-assessment, why we see them as critical to the alchemy of success in microschools, has to do both with your interactions in the learning environment, as well as your interactions from a business standpoint. And what we have found is that most people in any given moment are somewhere on a spectrum between curiosity and judgment. When you encounter new ideas or new people or a situation that is perhaps vexing or difficult, we all tend toward either curiosity about that situation or judgment about that situation. What we have found over and over again is that curiosity tends to lend towards a broader base of solutions. And this is something that Tom really taught me when we were starting out running our micro schools. We were both using similar platforms. And we were talking one day about Khan Academy, and I was just sure that I had this student who was pulling the wool over my eyes and purposefully trying to deceive me in what they were doing. And Tom offered me a different perspective around just getting curious about what was happening. This was new for all of us. Tom and I were both learning to use Khan Academy in our micro schools. Our students were learning to use Khan Academy in our micro schools. And I took his advice and I got curious. And instead of saying to the student what was going through my head of, I know you're trying to get out of your work and we need to talk about this issue, I said, tell me about what's happening when you're on Khan Academy. Show me what you're doing. And it turned out that this student was not, in fact, trying to deceive me. They thought that they were enacting the procedure the way it had been described. And in fact, they were, but they weren't getting the procedure quite right. And it was giving them different information. So they were reporting that information to me truly from a genuine place of trying to be in compliance with what we were talking about. And it just really illustrated for me the need to lean into curiosity before judgment. And I have found that to be true not only in my interactions with my students, but in interactions with my parents and interactions with the larger community around what microschooling is. Microschooling is still a very new field. And so there will be hardships and changes that come up. And the more that you can stand in a place of curiosity, the more likely you are to see possible solutions that you may not have considered previously. And so as you think about yourself in terms of curiosity and judgment, I would offer you this scale. At one end is judgment, leaning into a quick decision about what is happening. And the other end is curiosity, where you kind of stand open to see what is happening here, why is it happening, what else might I need to know about this? And I would put judgment at a 1 and curiosity at a 10. Quick reminder here, this isn't about perfect expressions of these characteristics. This is about reflecting on where you fall on a spectrum and deciding what might be useful to you with regard to that skill. So go ahead and rate yourself somewhere on that scale, 1 to 10, 1 being judgment, 10 being curiosity. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next characteristic, which is that of being a lifelong learner. The reason that being a lifelong learner is part of our alchemy of success is that we have really seen over and over again, not just in preparing other microschool leaders to run microschools, but really with regard to education as a whole, my own experience with students has led me to believe that you cannot ask students to do something which you are not capable of or willing to do yourself. And so when we think about being a lifelong learner, we can't encourage students to be lifelong learners if we ourselves are not walking that walk. And what I'd like to offer you with regard to being a lifelong learner is to really consider learning in its authentic state. Often we think about learning in terms of strictly academic content. Do you know your math facts? Have you learned or reviewed some point of grammar? But really learning takes place every day, all day long. It can be learning a new crochet stitch. It can be figuring out how to fix your sprinkler system by watching YouTube videos. So as you think about yourself, really consider your own capacity for being a lifelong learner. And as we create this spectrum or scale, what I would offer you is that at a 1 is I actively avoid learning anything new. And again, these are kind of meant to be extremes. And at a 10 is I am so interested in learning. I am looking every day for new things to learn, and I'm excited to find new things that I don't know about. So go ahead and rate yourself on that scale, and we will move on to our next characteristic, which is shared power. Now, shared power, I think, is sometimes a little bit intimidating for people to think about, especially if you are someone coming from the more traditional system, or from a more traditional environment in which there's a very top-down approach. One person is in charge, everyone else is kind of at the leisure of that person who's in charge and their whims. Shared power really is about opportunities for everyone to participate in that power structure. I want to be clear, though, that what it's not is laissez-faire, everybody just does what they want, and there's no one kind of manning the ship. So when we think about shared power, particularly with regard to microschools, what we're talking about is how much opportunity do students and or parents, as well as yourself, have in creating that power structure. And as you think about that spectrum, what I would offer you on one end of that spectrum is that very hierarchical, one person's in charge and is the only person who makes decisions, and everybody else is enacting those decisions without say. And on the other end of that spectrum is every person has an opportunity to engage in the discourse around power and give input into what that power structure should look like. So it's not necessarily everyone is on equal footing from a decision-making standpoint, but everybody has input. In my own microschool, students have a lot of input into what they're learning about, but they can't climb on the roof because I'm the person who is ultimately responsible for their safety and well-being. So again, not laissez-faire, but do people have the opportunity to engage in that discourse around what the power structure looks like? And at a 1 is that hierarchical standpoint, and at a 10 is everybody's getting that opportunity to have input. Go ahead and rate yourself on that, and we will move on to capacity and mental load. Now here, we're not talking about a dichotomy. Rather, these two characteristics really are intertwined, if you will. And so the first part that I want to talk about is capacity. And Rochelle talked a little bit about this with regard to ratio of adults to children and how many students you have in your microschool. Capacity really is about your ability to have that individual relationship, your ability to kind of find homeostasis or balance in what you are doing. And then mental load is all of the things you're already doing. So when you think about what's happening in your life, what else is kind of on that metaphorical plate? You might be a person who has ailing parents who are living with you, as well as young toddlers who are needing a lot of attention. That's part of your mental load, and it might impact your capacity. It's not to say that that means you absolutely shouldn't run a microschool. In fact, we know someone who for whom that was true, that they had an ailing spouse and they had young children, and their microschool was their kind of refuge. It was the place that they had agency, and it was something that was filling their cup rather than draining their cup. So just because you have a lot on your plate doesn't mean that you shouldn't run a microschool, but getting very honest about what's on that plate will help you decide what your capacity is. And so as you think about your capacity and your mental load, the scale that I would offer you is at a 1, you have so many things on your plate that literally things are just falling off and you're not able to choose what those things are. And at a 10 is, I have so much room on my plate, I am looking for multiple things to add to that plate. Again, these are meant to be extremes, and it isn't about some perfect ideal place in the spectrum, but rather an honest look at where you are at this current moment and what that will look like in your microschool. The next characteristic that I want to talk about is adaptability. This is one of the things that as an educator, I have really had to embrace. I started more years ago than I care to admit working in early childhood. I was a Head Start teacher, and I just loved lesson planning. I loved all of the beauty of the way I could put together my week and how things would fit together. It was color coded, it met all the standards. And then I would walk into my classroom on Monday morning to these 13 beautiful souls who had completely different ideas about what our week was going to look like. And I realized that I could spend my time kind of fighting against their ideas and really hold tight to that plan that I had made, or I could find my capacity for adaptability. And adaptability really has served me well, not just with my students, but also with parents and families. And this is another place where it can really impact your business life. Being able to be adaptive in this particular environment where microschooling is so new in many places and is an ever-changing field, your capacity for adaptability will serve you in the sustainability of your microschool and of your business. And so as we think about adaptability, what I would offer you is a scale where at a 1 is I am so worried about change that I avoid adaptability or changing from my plans at all costs. And at a 10 is I have plans A, B, C, D, E, F, Z, and I am eager to try out a whole new set of plans if that's what the day holds for me. Again, these are meant to be extremes. And I want to be really clear that this is not some kind of moralistic standpoint. All of us have moments where we're more flexible or more rigid based on the kind of day we're having or the mood we're in, or all kinds of factors. So really look at this with a lot of grace for yourself. And again, reflect on where you are on that scale and what that might look like for your microschool. Next, let's talk about enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is often the thing that I say will carry the day. If you have authentic enthusiasm for a topic and you have built real rapport with your students, even if they find that topic wildly boring, your own enthusiasm often will pull them in to at least considering and participating in that topic. But I want to be clear that enthusiasm doesn't always look like the classic idea of enthusiasm. Enthusiasm does not always come in a Miss Frizzle dress that is coordinated to the unit with super excitement, bubbly personality. Certainly that is where some people live. It is often where I live with my students. However, I have known so many educators and child whisperers who have a quiet enthusiasm that is not something from across the room you might be able to see, but it is authentic. And they engage with their students in that same way of their own enthusiasm, pulling and drawing their students into what they're talking about. And so as you think about this scale for enthusiasm, I would encourage you to view enthusiasm from a spectrum of at a 1 is I'm kind of just here checking the boxes because I have to. And that we're doing this doesn't really matter. And at a 10 is I am so excited to share what I have for you today that I literally am bursting at the seams and thinking of more things that I could share as soon as possible. Next, let's talk about vulnerability. And this is perhaps one of the places I have both grown the most as an educator and also one of the things that I think is most crucial to the success of a microschool. And I want to talk about this in terms both of you as the person in the room, the adult in the room, or the adult that you hire in the room, as well as your students, because this is another place where we cannot ask our students to do something we are not willing to do ourselves. And when we think about what learning really is, learning is always a vulnerable situation. It may not always feel personally vulnerable, but when you learn something, you are inherently in conflict because you either have to reckon with the fact that you did not have this information before and you were in a state of ignorance, or that the information you had wasn't quite right. And now you have to assimilate this new information. And that is a vulnerable state to be in. And so when we think about what vulnerability looks like in a learning environment, it's an incredibly important aspect of the culture and environment that we need to foster in order for learning to take place. And I want to be really clear here that vulnerability, particularly on the part of the adult, is not about inappropriate vulnerability of making children responsible for your emotions or responsible for things outside of their control, but rather about being willing to take off your own armor and say, I don't know something, and model that kind of vulnerable experience of what it looks like to address the fact that you may not have known something or that the information you had wasn't quite right. And now you have to assimilate this new information. So often we kind of present this idea that students will be done learning when they graduate high school or college or whatever that magic litmus test is. But the reality is we all go on learning for the rest of our lives, and students need to see adults who are engaged in that process as well. So as you think about your own kind of place on the spectrum of vulnerability, I would offer you this spectrum in which one is, I am so worried about people seeing any of my flaws, that I am wearing so much armor, I could never take it all off. And I would never take it all off because that sounds too dangerous. And at a 10 is, I am excited to be appropriately vulnerable with people because I know that that leads to growth. And even though vulnerability may be uncomfortable, I look for opportunities to engage in that vulnerability. The next characteristic I want to talk about is emotional regulation. This is another place in which we cannot ask our students to be more emotionally regulated than we are ourselves. And emotional regulation is truly part of what it takes to create an emotionally safe environment for students. And so as we think about emotional regulation, I would offer you some ideas around what emotional regulation is and isn't. As a really young teacher, I really thought that emotional regulation just looked like being positive all the time. If I said everything in a cheerful voice and I gave it a positive spin and I was never angry and I never lost my cool, then that's what emotional regulation looked like. But I was really narrowing the emotional spectrum down to a really narrow slice of what emotions we experience as humans. And so I was only modeling positive emotion or an inauthentic view of the emotions I was experiencing. And when we do that, we don't teach children how to engage with their own emotions, how to label their own emotions, and how to process those emotions. So as you think about your own place of emotional regulation, I would create a spectrum for you where at a 1 is, I feel absolutely at the mercy of my emotions, and I have no ability to choose my response while overwhelmed by emotion. And at a 10 is, I experience a full range of emotions and I feel in control of my actions while experiencing those emotions. So the next place that we're going to talk about, the next thing that we're going to talk about is less of a characteristic and more of a skill, perhaps. But your ability to have difficult conversations will absolutely influence the success and sustainability of your micro school. One of the things that Tom and I and Rochelle and I often talk about it is not if you will have to have difficult conversations, but when. And so as you think about your capacity for difficult conversations, I would invite you to create a scale where at a 1 is, I avoid difficult conversations at all costs. Even when I know that not having that conversation will create more work or continue hardship that I am experiencing. And at a 10 is the idea that difficult conversations really are trust building, that when you engage in a difficult conversation, you are saying to the other person, I care enough about our relationship to be in this difficult moment with you. And so at a 10 is, I am so eager to be in relationship with my students, with my parents, with my community, that I look for every opportunity to have those difficult conversations, and I lean into them. Again, these are meant to be pretty wide extremes. Probably most people are not falling in either a perfect 1 or a perfect 10, but really give yourself that opportunity to reflect. How do you feel about difficult conversations, and how easy is it for you to lean into those difficult conversations? Next, we're going to talk about growth mindset. And you may be thinking, isn't growth mindset really a lot like being a lifelong learner? And they're similar in that it is about willingness to learn new things and to continue to learn new things. But this really has to do more specifically with the mindset around that. As you think about what growth mindset is, I would offer you kind of the concept of, are things fixed, or is there ability to keep growing? And so when we think about growth mindset, we're talking about people's capacity to continue to grow and learn. That doesn't mean that with effort, everyone's going to become an Olympic gold medalist in swimming. But it does mean that everybody has the capacity to grow from where they are with practice and effort. And when we think about growth mindset, that's really what we're talking about, is that belief in the capacity to improve your skill set, and that is not a fixed or finite situation. And so as you think about growth mindset, I would offer you a spectrum of, at a 1 is, I believe that people's capacity to learn is totally fixed, and everybody has kind of a hard ceiling at which they will max out their ability. And at a 10 is, I believe that everybody has the capacity to keep improving. And again, everybody can kind of be in a place of fixed mindset sometime with regard to a specific subject or on a specific day. So really give yourself a lot of grace as you look and assess yourself in this category, and think in broad terms about how you feel with regard to growth mindset. That is the end of our self-assessment. Much like Tom, if you have questions or want to dig in to these characteristics more deeply, I really will encourage you to reach out. You'll get a link at the end of this call to schedule more time with us, and we would love to talk with you in more depth about these characteristics.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been spectacular. Wherever and whenever you're watching and listening and experiencing this, we're really excited. There'll be a redirect when this video ends to set up a one-on-one coaching call with me called a Microschool Dream Conversation. It's free. And basically, I'm going to say, tell me everything you want me to know about you and what you want to do. And then I will reflect back the things that that would maybe support you a little bit. We're very, very excited for you and about this movement and about what is happening for kids, and invite you to keep walking down this road. And if you want to walk with us, we would love that. Thanks. Have a great one.